She's my girlfriend, Heather. Back off. Connor's voice cut through the Peony Garden's calm, his green eyes blazing as Heather's smirk faltered, ice cream dripping down Danielle's dress. In that heart-pounding moment, a billionaire's love clashed with venomous hate, setting the stage for a story of resilience and triumph. Will Danielle, the brilliant Wall Street analyst, rise above the racial taunts that shadow her every step? Can Connor's secret empire silence her tormentors, or will their cruelty shatter her dreams? Stick around to uncover the jaw-dropping twists. Where are you watching from and what's the time there? Drop a comment with your guesses. How will Danielle's fire burn through the hate? Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to catch our latest stories of courage and love. Don't miss a second of this unforgettable journey. Share your thoughts and join the conversation now. The glass tower of Sterling and Pierce loomed over Wall Street like a monument to ambition, its sleek lines reflecting the dawn's first light. Danielle Brooks stepped off the elevator, her long black hair cascading over a tailored navy blazer, each strand a silent rebellion against the polished conformity around her. Her deep brown eyes, sharp as a predator's, scanned the trading floor with a clarity that had earned her whispers of awe and envy. At 32, she was the firm's rising star, dubbed the Oracle of Wall Street for stock picks so prescient they'd saved clients millions. Her latest call, a daring bet on a biotech startup, had tripled a hedge fund's portfolio overnight. Yet, as she strode to her desk, the air crackled with hostility, a venom that clung to her dark skin like morning dew. Heather Vaughn leaned against a glass partition, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, her blue eyes glinting with malice. "Morning, Danielle," she purred, her voice a blade wrapped in silk. "Still crunching numbers for the diversity quota?" The words landed like a slap, drawing smirks from nearby analysts. Danielle's jaw tightened, but she kept her gaze. On her monitor, where stock charts danced in hypnotic patterns, she wouldn't give Heather the satisfaction of a reaction. Not today, not ever. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up market trends, each click a defiance against the whispers that followed her like shadows. The trading floor buzzed with the frenetic energy of Wall Street, phones ringing, screens flashing, voices barking orders. Danielle thrived in this chaos, her mind a steel trap for patterns others missed. She'd grown up in Harlem, where every dollar was hard-won, every dream a fight. That grit had carried her through Yale, then through Sterling, and Pierce's grueling interviews, where she'd outshone Ivy League pedigrees with her raw talent. But to Heather and her clique, she was an outsider, her blackness a stain on their marble and glass world. "She doesn't belong," Heather muttered to Ryan, a smug junior analyst with a tie that cost more than Danielle's rent. His laugh was a cruel echo, slicing through the office hum. Danielle's desk was a fortress of order, neat stacks of reports, a single photo of her mother smiling at a Harlem jazz club. She reached for her coffee, the mug's warmth grounding her as Heather's voice drifted over again. "Look at her, playing at high finance. Bet she's just here for the photo ops." Colleagues chuckled, their glances darting to Danielle, who kept her eyes on her screen. The biotech stock she'd championed ticked upward, validating her instincts. But the victory felt hollow. Each taunt was a needle, pricking at the pride she'd fought so hard to build. She wasn't just fighting for deals. She was fighting to be seen. At the coffee machine, Danielle poured a fresh cup, her curls brushing her shoulders as she moved. Heather sauntered over, her perfume sharp as her smile. "Danielle, still dreaming of the corner office?" she asked, loud enough for the break room to hear. "Stick to spreadsheets. This place needs class, not urban flair." The word urban dripped with disdain, a code for everything Heather despised about Danielle's existence. Colleagues stifled laughs, their eyes avoiding hers. Danielle's grip tightened on her mug, her pulse hammering. "Class isn't bought, Heather," she said, her voice low but steady, each word a polished stone. "It's earned, like the Henderson deal I closed last week." Heather's smile faltered, but her eyes burned with defiance. Back at her desk, Danielle pulled up the Henderson portfolio, her analysis a masterpiece of risk and reward. She'd spotted a market gap others had missed, saving a client millions. Yet the credit had gone to Ryan, who'd presented her work as his own. The injustice gnawed at her, but she swallowed it, channeling her anger into her next pitch. The numbers were her language, her truth, a place where her skin didn't define her, but the whispers never stopped. "She's too loud," Ryan muttered to a colleague, his voice carrying. "Too different." Danielle's fingers froze on her keyboard, her breath catching. Different. The word was a cage, locking her out of their world. By noon, the office hummed with deals, but Danielle felt like she was drowning. She slipped into the stairwell, the cool concrete a refuge from the glass tower's glare. Leaning against the wall, she pressed her palms to her eyes, fighting the sting of tears. They didn't see her, the woman who'd outsmarted market crashes, who'd earned her place. They saw only her skin, her curls, her roots. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother. "Shine, baby. They can't dim you." The words were a lifeline, pulling her back. She straightened, her resolve hardening like steel. Danielle returned to her desk, her heels clicking with purpose. The trading floor's noise faded as she dove back into her work, her mind a razor slicing through data. Heather's taunts, Ryan's smirks, they were noise, nothing more. She was Danielle Brooks, forged in Harlem's fire, tempered by Wall Street's cruelty. They could mock her, but they couldn't break her. Not today, not ever. Her screen glowed with a new stock pick, a bold move that could silence her doubters. As the market ticked upward, so did her spirit. This was her battlefield, and she'd fight with every number, every deal, every breath. The morning sun filtered through Central Park's ancient oaks, casting dappled light on the winding trails, where Sterling and Pierce's annual 5K charity run was set to unfold. Danielle Brooks laced up her running shoes, her long black curls tied back in a defiant ponytail, each bounce a quiet rebellion against the office's venom. She'd trained for weeks, her lean frame slicing through dawn's mist, her breath steady despite the weight of Wall Street's scorn. The run was more than a fundraiser. It was her chance to escape the glass tower's suffocating hostility, to prove her strength beyond spreadsheets. Her deep brown eyes scanned the gathering crowd of colleagues, their neon vests clashing with the park's serenity. But the air crackled with a familiar tension, and at its center stood Heather Vaughn, her blonde hair gleaming under a designer visor, her smile sharp as a blade. "Ready to eat dust, Danielle?" Heather called, her voice slicing through the ghee. Chatter of warming up runners. Her clique, Ryan and a handful of analysts, snickered, their eyes raking over Danielle's simple black leggings and tank top. "Stick to numbers," Heather added, loud enough for heads to turn. "Running's for those with actual stamina." The words stung like a whip, but Danielle stretched her calves, her focus unwavering. She'd grown up racing her cousins through Harlem's streets, dodging cracks in the pavement fueled by grit. This was no different. She adjusted her earbuds, a jazz playlist pulsing, and took her place at the starting line, her heart pounding with purpose. The whistle blew, and the pack surged forward, sneakers pounding the earth. Danielle found her rhythm, her strides long and fluid, the park's greenery a blur. She relished the burn in her lungs, the freedom of motion, a stark contrast to the firm's suffocating cubicles. But Heather's presence loomed, her neon vest flashing just ahead. Danielle pushed harder, weaving through runners, her ponytail swinging like a metronome. Spectators cheered from the sidelines, their voices a distant hum, but Heather's taunts cut through. "Don't embarrass yourself, Danielle," she shouted, glancing back with a smirk. "This isn't your scene." Colleagues laughed, their loyalty to Heather's clique as predictable as the market's opening bell. Danielle's jaw clenched, but she kept her pace, her eyes locked on the trail's curve. She wouldn't let Heather's venom slow her down. The path narrowed, trees closing in, and the pack tightened. Heather, now beside her, leaned in close, her elbow jutting out. "You're out of your league," she hissed, her voice low but venomous. Before Danielle could respond, Heather's shoulder slammed into her, deliberate and sharp. The impact threw Danielle off balance, her ankle twisting as she stumbled into the grass. Pain shot through her leg and she hit the ground hard, her palms scraping against dirt. Gasps rose from nearby runners, but no one stopped. The pack surged past, their vests a blur, leaving Danielle sprawled in the morning dew. Humiliation burned hotter than the pain in her ankle. She pushed herself up, her breath ragged, her curls clinging to her sweat-dampened face. Heather's laughter echoed, fading as she rejoined her clique ahead. Danielle's fists clenched, her pride warring with the urge to quit. She wasn't a quitter, not in Harlem, not on Wall Street, not here. But as she struggled to stand, a strong hand gripped her arm, steadying her. "You okay?" The voice was deep, warm, cutting through her haze. She looked up into piercing green eyes, framed by a chiseled face and tousled blonde hair. Honor. Hayes, a billionaire client she'd advised months ago, stood over her, his concern as tangible as the morning air. Her heart skipped, caught by the intensity of his gaze. "I'm fine," Danielle managed, her voice steady despite the throb in her ankle. She brushed dirt from her hands, hyper-aware of Connor's hand still on her arm, his touch a quiet anchor. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the trail. Heather, now a few paces away, turned at his voice, her smirk faltering. "Just a clumsy moment," she cooed, batting her lashes, her tone syrupy. "Danielle." "Tripped, no big deal." Her clique nodded, their loyalty a shield, but Connor's focus stayed on Danielle, unwavering. "Didn't look like a trip to me," he said, his voice low, edged with steel. Danielle's pulse raced, not from the fall, but from the spark, in his eyes a silent promise that someone saw her, truly saw her. She stood, testing her ankle, her pride bruised but intact. Connor's hand lingered, then dropped, leaving a warmth she couldn't ignore. "You sure you're good?" he asked. Softer now, his gaze searching. Danielle nodded, her curls bouncing as she straightened. "I don't go down that easily," she said, a faint smile breaking through. His lips curved, a flicker of admiration lighting his face. The whistle sounded for the next heat, but the moment hung between them, electric and unspoken. Heather's eyes burned from afar, her clique, whispering, but Danielle felt a shift. She wasn't alone on this trail, not anymore. She took a step, pain be damned, ready to run again, her spirit unbroken. The Central Park trail blurred as Danielle Brooks crumpled to the grass, her ankle screaming with pain from Heather Vaughn's vicious shove. The sting of humiliation burned hotter than the twist in her joint. Her long black curls splayed across the damp earth like spilled ink. The charity run's cheers faded, replaced by the thud of her pulse, each beat a reminder of the venom she faced daily at Sterling and Pierce. Her vision swam, the weight of months, years of relentless taunts crashing down. She was the oracle of Wall Street, a woman who outsmarted markets, yet here she was, felled by a coworker's cruelty. Her breath hitched, the world tilting, and then darkness swallowed her whole. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground again. Connor Hayes, the billionaire whose portfolio she'd once saved, lifted her with effortless strength, his green eyes flashing with urgency. "Danielle, stay with me," he urged, his voice a lifeline piercing her haze. The crowd parted as he carried her through the park, his tailored jacket brushing her cheek, his heartbeat steady against her side. The scent of his cologne, cedar, and steel, grounded her as he navigated to his sleek black SUV, parked near the finish line. "Hospital now," he barked to his driver, cradling Danielle in the back seat, her head resting against his chest. The world outside blurred, but his presence was a rock in the storm. The hospital's sterile hum greeted them as Connor rushed her through the emergency entrance, his voice commanding but calm as he demanded a doctor. Nurses bustled, a stretcher appeared, but Connor stayed close, his hand brushing hers as they wheeled her to a curtained bay. Danielle stirred, the fog in her mind lifting, pain pulsing in her ankle. She blinked against the fluorescent glare, her gaze landing on Connor, now seated beside her, his broad shoulders hunched, his jacket draped over her like a shield. He was asleep, his blonde hair mussed, his chiseled features softened by exhaustion. Her heart twisted. Why was he still here, this man who barely knew her? She shifted, wincing, and his eyes snapped open, green and piercing, relief flooding his face. "You're awake," he said, his voice low, warm as a hearth. "You scared me out there." Danielle managed a weak smile, her curls clinging to her forehead. "Guess I'm tougher than I look," she murmured, her voice hoarse but steady. Connor leaned closer, his gaze searching. "Tough doesn't cover it. I've seen your work. Danielle, you're a force." The words landed like sunlight, warming the cold ache in her chest. She wasn't just a number cruncher to him. She was seen. The doctor arrived, confirming a mild sprain, nothing broken. "Rest and ice," he instructed, handing her a brace. But Danielle's mind wasn't on her ankle. It was on Connor, still, by her side, his presence a quiet rebellion against the loneliness she'd carried. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice soft but direct, her brown eyes locking onto his. He hesitated, then leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his intensity disarming. "Your pitch last year, on the biotech stock. It wasn't just numbers. It was vision, fire. I've admired you since." His confession hung between them, raw and unguarded, sparking something in her chest she hadn't felt in years. They talked as the hospital's hum faded to a murmur, time slipping away. She shared snippets of her Harlem childhood, jazz records spinning in her mother's kitchen. He spoke of a small Midwestern town where ambition had been his escape. Their worlds were miles apart, yet each story wove them closer, their laughter, a fragile bridge. "You're not what I expected," Danielle said, her fingers tracing the brace. "Neither are you," Connor replied, a smile tugging at his lips. "But I'm glad I found out." Her heart raced, the weight of Wall Street's scorn momentarily forgotten. As the nurse prepared her discharge papers, Connor's gaze softened. "Let me take you somewhere when you're better," he said, his voice a quiet vow. "The Brooklyn Botanic Garden. Peonies are in bloom. Just you and me." Danielle's breath caught, the offer a beacon in her storm. She nodded, her smile breaking through like dawn. "I'd like that." He helped her to her feet, his hand steadying her, their touch electric. The hospital's sterile walls faded as they stepped into the evening air, her ankle braced but her spirit soaring. For the first time in months, she felt more than her work, more than the hate. She felt alive, tethered to a man whose eyes saw her soul. The Brooklyn Botanic Garden glowed under the late afternoon sun, its peony fields bursting with pinks, creams and corals, each bloom a whisper of spring's promise. Danielle Brooks stepped through the garden's gates, her black dress flowing like a river, her long curls cascading over her shoulders, free and untamed. Her ankle, still braced from the charity run, ached faintly, but her heart thrummed with a nervous thrill. Connor Hayes walked beside her, his green eyes catching the light, his easy smile disarming the walls she'd built around herself. Their hands brushed as they wandered the winding paths, fingers grazing in a dance of possibility, each touch sparking warmth in her chest. For the first time in years, Danielle felt seen, not as the oracle of Wall Street, but as a woman whose dreams could bloom like the flowers around her. The air carried the sweet scent of peonies, mingling with the distant hum of Brooklyn's pulse. Connor's laughter rang out as he recounted a boyhood misadventure, his Midwestern drawl softening the edges of his billionaire aura. "I fell out of a tree trying to impress a girl," he admitted, his grin boyish. Danielle chuckled, her curls bouncing. "And here I thought you were born in a suit," her jazz-inflected voice teased, drawing a spark to his eyes. They paused by a cluster of blush-pink peonies, their petals trembling in the breeze. "These remind me of you," Connor said, his voice low, sincere. Bold, beautiful, unapologetic. Danielle's breath caught, her brown eyes meeting his, a current passing between them, fragile yet electric. He offered to buy ice cream from a nearby vendor, his hand lingering on hers before he stepped away. Danielle leaned against a wooden bench, the garden's serenity wrapping her like a shawl. She closed her eyes, savoring the moment, until a sharp voice shattered the calm. "Slumming it with charity cases, Danielle?" Heather Vaughn stood before her blonde hair gleaming under a wide-brimmed hat, her blue eyes venomous. Her presence was a violation, her designer heels grinding into the garden's peace. "What are you doing here?" Danielle asked, her voice steady but edged, her fists tightening. Heather's smirk widened, her gaze raking over Danielle's dress. "Just enjoying the view. Shame you don't fit it." Danielle stood, her curls swaying, her resolve a quiet fire. "I'm exactly where I belong," she said, each word a blade. Heather stepped closer, her perfume sharp as her intent. "You're out of your depth playing girlfriend to a billionaire. Stick to your spreadsheets." Before Danielle could retort, Heather tripped, her ice cream cone tipping forward, chocolate dripping onto Danielle's dress. The sticky stain spread across the black fabric, a deliberate wound. Heather's laugh was a blade, slicing through the garden's hush. "Oops," she purred, her eyes glinting with triumph. Danielle's pulse roared, her hands trembling with rage, but she held her ground, refusing to crumble. Footsteps crunched on the gravel and Connor appeared, his green eyes darkening as he took in the scene. "What's going on?" he demanded, his voice low, a storm brewing beneath his calm. Heather batted her lashes, her tone syrupy. "Just a little accident, Connor. Danielle's so clumsy." But his gaze locked onto Danielle, seeing the hurt. In her eyes, the stain on her dress. "She's my girlfriend, Heather. Back off." The words cut through the air, sharp and final, silencing Heather's smirk. Her face crumpled, shock stealing her bravado. Danielle's heart soared, Connor's defense a fortress around her wounded pride. The garden seemed to hold its breath, Peony swaying as if in applause. Without a word, Connor took Danielle's hand, leading her away from Heather's stunned figure. "Come on," he said, his voice softening, his thumb brushing her knuckles. He guided her to a nearby boutique, insisting on replacing the ruined dress. Inside, under the shop's warm lights, he held up a deep emerald gown, his smile gentle. "This one's you," he said. And Danielle felt her walls crack, his care a balm to Heather's cruelty. She changed, the new dress hugging her curves, her curls framing her like a crown. They stepped back into the evening, the city's pulse humming beyond the garden. At a candlelit restaurant, they sat across from each other, the stain forgotten. Danielle shared her love for Nina Simone, her voice curling around the notes of her favorite songs. Connor spoke of old novels, his eyes lighting up at her stories of Harlem jazz clubs. As dessert arrived, a shooting star streaked across the sky, visible through the window. "Make a wish," Connor whispered, leaning closer. Danielle closed, her eyes, her heart whispering for love, for strength. Their lips met, a kiss soft yet fierce, sealing a bond no venom could break. The city's lights glittered outside, but in that moment, they were the only world that mattered. The glass tower of Sterling and Pierce gleamed under Manhattan's morning sun, but inside, the air was thick with betrayal. Danielle Brooks strode through the trading floor, her long black curls pulled into a sleek ponytail, her tailored blazer a shield against the hostility that pulsed like a heartbeat. Her deep brown eyes, sharp as ever, scanned her desk, where a critical client report awaited, a pitch that could cement her as lead analyst. She was the oracle of Wall Street, her predictions a lifeline for investors, but the whispers that trailed her were venomous, rooted in the color of her skin. Heather Vaughn's ice-blue gaze followed her from across the room, her smirk a silent promise of trouble. Danielle's jaw tightened. She knew the game was about to get uglier. She opened the report on her screen, her heart sinking as numbers glared back, glaringly wrong. Profit projections were skewed, risk assessments botched, errors no analyst of her caliber would make. Her pulse quickened. This was no mistake. "You're slipping, Danielle," Heather purred, sauntering by with a coffee cup, her voice loud. Enough for colleagues to turn. Clients expect better. Danielle's fingers froze on her keyboard, her eyes locking onto Heather's. "I didn't touch this," she said, her voice low, steel beneath silk. "You did." Heather's smile was venomous, her feigned innocence a blade. "Don't blame me for your failures. Clients notice, you know." The words were a calculated strike, implying Danielle's blackness made her suspect. The office buzzed with its usual chaos, phones ringing, screens flashing, but Danielle felt the walls closing in. She stormed to Heather's desk, her heels clicking with purpose. "I know you doctored this report," she said, her voice cutting through the hum, drawing eyes. "Undo it, or I'll prove it." Heather leaned back, unfazed, her blonde hair glinting under fluorescent lights. "Prove what? That you're out of your depth?" Her tone dripped with disdain, the word "you" heavy with racial undertones. Colleagues whispered, their glances a mix of doubt and curiosity. Danielle's blood boiled, but she held her ground, her curls swaying as she turned away, refusing to let Heather see her crack. By noon, the sabotage spread like wildfire. A Slack notification pinged. An anonymous message, but Heather's fingerprints were all over it. Danielle's gold digger act with Hayes won't save her sloppy work. The words seared, each one a dagger aimed at her integrity. She opened her email, finding a client complaint forwarded by Heather, questioning her reliability. The errors in the report were now office lore, painting Danielle as incompetent. She marched to HR, her evidence, a trail of audit logs clutched in her hand. "Heather tampered with my work," she said, her voice steady but fierce. The HR manager, a gray-haired man with a weary sigh, glanced at the logs. "No hard proof," he said, waving her off. "Resolve it internally." The dismissal stung, a reminder of the firm's unwritten rule. Her blackness was a hurdle, not a strength. Back at her desk, Danielle's phone buzzed with a text from Connor. "Dinner tonight?" "You're stronger than their noise." His words were a lifeline, but the weight of the day pressed harder. She dove into her pitch notes, determined to rebuild the report from scratch, but another blow landed. Her folder, hours of meticulous research, was gone. She spotted Ryan, Heather's ally, smirking as he passed. "Missing something," he taunted, his tie glinting with privilege. "Maybe you misplaced it. Stressful week, right?" Danielle's fists clenched, her mind racing. "Give them back," she said, her voice a low growl. He shrugged, his grin daring her to crack. "Notes? What notes?" Her heart pounded, but she walked away, her resolve a quiet fire. The break room buzzed with gossip, colleagues avoiding her gaze. Danielle sipped coffee, pretending not to hear Heather's voice carrying from a corner. "Her little romance with Hayes won't fix her mistakes." The words were a noose, tightening around her career. She slipped into the stairwell, the concrete walls a refuge from the office's glare. Alone, she pressed her palms to her eyes, fighting the sting of tears. They weren't just mocking her. They were dismantling her, piece by piece. Her phone buzzed again, Connor's text glowing. "You're unstoppable. Call me." His faith was a spark in the dark, but the firm's betrayal was a storm she couldn't outrun. Danielle returned to her desk, her curls catching the light as she rebuilt her pitch, line by line. Each number was a defiance, each calculation a reclaiming of her worth. Heather and Ryan thought they could bury her, but she was forged in Harlem's fire, tempered by battles they'd never understand. The trading floor's hum faded as she worked, her focus ablaze. They could tamper with her reports, steal her notes, spread their lies, but they couldn't steal her mind. She was Danielle Brooks, and she'd fight, not just for her career, but for the truth they tried to erase. The Sterling and Pierce trading floor buzzed with its usual frenzy, but a storm was brewing beneath the surface. Danielle Brooks sat at her desk, her long black curls pulled tight, her deep brown eyes fixed on her screen as she finalized a pitch to reclaim her stolen work. The air was thick with betrayal. Heather Vaughn's sabotage, doctored reports, stolen notes, venomous Slack messages, still searing her mind. But today, the tide would turn. Danielle's resolve burned like a beacon, her spirit unbroken despite the firm's relentless efforts to dim her light. She was the oracle of Wall Street, and no amount of prejudice could erase her brilliance. Across the room, Heather leaned into Ryan, her blonde hair glinting, her whisper sharp. She's done. Clients are dropping her. Their smirks were a familiar knife, but Danielle kept her focus, her fingers dancing across the keyboard. Then her phone buzzed. A message from an intern, Mia, a quiet ally who'd had enough. Check the company Slack. I leaked their messages. Danielle's heart raced as she opened the app. There, in stark text, were Heather's words. Her kind doesn't belong in high finance. Gold digger playing at analyst. Ryan's messages echoed the venom. Diversity hires, a liability. The posts had gone viral within the firm, shared by Mia to expose their cruelty. The office fell silent, colleagues' eyes darting between screens and Danielle. Heather's face paled, her coffee cup trembling in her hand as she scrolled through the leaked thread. Ryan's smirk vanished, his tie askew as he muttered, "This can't be happening." But it was. Clients, alerted by the viral messages, flooded the CEO's inbox demanding accountability. How does your firm tolerate racism? One email read, CC'd to Danielle. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with a flicker of justice. She hadn't sought this fight, but she wouldn't back down. The CEO, Mr. Hargrove, a silver-haired man with a penchant for profit over principle, stormed into the conference room, his face thunderous. "Staff meeting now," he barked. Danielle filed in with the others, her head high, her curls catching the fluorescent light. Hargrove held up his tablet, the leaked messages glowing like a confession. "Her kind doesn't belong," he read aloud, his voice cutting through the room's tension. Gasps rippled, colleagues shifting uncomfortably. Heather shrank in her seat, her blue eyes wide with panic. Ryan's hands fidgeted, his bravado gone. "This is unacceptable," Hargrove snapped. "You're both fired, effective immediately." Heather's voice cracked, desperate. "It was a joke, sir. We didn't mean—" Hargrove cut her off, his glare icy. "You've cost us clients. You're done." Danielle stood at the room's edge, her heart pounding. Justice was bittersweet. Validation, yes, but the scars of their hate lingered. She caught Heather's eye, her stare unflinching. "You tried to break me," Danielle said, her voice low, resonant. "But I'm still here." Heather's lip quivered, her apology choked and ignored. Ryan slunk out, head bowed, his career in ruins. That evening, Danielle met Connor at a quiet diner, the neon glow softening the day's edges. His green eyes searched hers as he slid into the booth, his hand finding hers. "I heard what happened," he said, his voice a steady anchor. "I called Hargrove, told him to clean house or lose my investments." Danielle's breath caught. Connor's influence had tipped the scales. "You didn't have to," she said, her curls brushing her shoulders as she leaned closer. "But I'm glad you did." His smile was soft, but his words carried weight. "I hid my wealth to keep us real, Danielle. I love you, not your title." She studied him, the sting of the firm's betrayal easing under his gaze. "They thought they could erase me," she said, her voice steady. "But I'm not going anywhere." Connor squeezed her hand, his touch a vow. "You're unstoppable." The diner's hum faded, their connection a fortress against the world. Danielle's spirit, forged in Harlem's fire, burned brighter than ever. Heather's lies had crumbled, but Danielle's fight was far from over. She'd rebuild, stronger, her brilliance a beacon no one could dim. Central Park shimmered under a velvet sky, its ancient trees framing a clearing where Danielle Brooks stood, her white gown glowing like moonlight. The peonies woven into arches around her burst with pinks and creams, their petals trembling in the evening breeze. Her long black curls fell free, a cascade of defiance against the world that had tried to dim her light. Tonight was her wedding. To Connor Hayes, the billionaire who saw her soul, not just her brilliance, as the oracle of Wall Street. Her deep brown eyes sparkled with resolve, but a quiet tremor ran through her as she clutched her mother's hand. The firm's venom, Heather Vaughn's lies, the stolen notes, the racial slurs, still echoed. But tonight, love would drown them out. The clearing buzzed with 40 guests, their chairs lined beneath fairy lights that twinkled like stars. Danielle's mother adjusted her veil, her eyes shining with pride. "They can't touch you, baby," she whispered, her voice a balm. Danielle squeezed her hand, her heart steadying. The Atlanta skyline glittered beyond the trees, a silent witness to her triumph. A soulful jazz playlist curled through the air, Nina Simone's voice weaving promises of forever. Danielle stepped forward, her gown trailing, her braced ankle a faint reminder of the charity run where Connor had caught her body and soul. She reached the wooden arch where he stood, his plain suit regal, his green eyes locking onto hers with a smile that felt like dawn. The officiant's words wove their love into eternity, but Danielle's gaze never left Connor's. "Danielle," he began, his voice steady, fierce. "You're my home, my fire. I choose you, always." Her throat tightened as she spoke her vows. "Connor, you saw me, every scar, every dream, I'm yours forever." He slipped a simple band onto her finger, his touch a fortress. Their kiss sparked applause, but a sharp whisper cut through. "Charity case wedding," Heather Vaughn hissed, her blonde hair glinting from the guest line. Danielle's smile froze. Heather, invited out of professional courtesy, stood beside Ryan, her smirk a violation of the sacred moment. Danielle's pulse quickened, but Connor's hand found hers, grounding her. "Ignore her," he murmured, his voice a low anchor. The reception unfolded under the stars, tables draped in white linen, a homemade cake glowing with candles. Danielle mingled, her mother's laughter a balm, but Heather's shadow loomed. At the toast, Ryan raised a glass, his grin too wide. "To Danielle and Connor," he said, his tone dripping. "Proof love doesn't need flash." Snickers rippled from Heather's corner, and Danielle's chest tightened. Heather leaned into Ryan, whispering, "She's punching above her weight with him." The words were a knife, but Connor's hand squeezed hers under the table, his eyes fierce. "They're nothing compared to you," he said, his voice a vow. Danielle slipped to the clearing's edge, the city's pulse steadying her. Connor joined her, his arms circling her waist, his breath warm against her cheek. "You okay?" he asked, his green eyes searching. "They're relentless," she admitted, her voice cracking. "It's not just the wedding, it's me, my skin, my place in their world." He turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face. "You're Danielle Brooks. You fought harder battles than their petty games." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, his handwritten vow. "Read this when they get loud. It's us against the noise." She clutched it, her heart swelling, the paper a lifeline. Against the venom. The night waned, guests dancing under the fairy lights. Heather and Ryan lingered, their laughter trailing like poison. Danielle caught Heather's parting glance, sharp as a blade, but she met it with a nod, her curls framing her like a crown. "We did it," Connor said, his voice soft but triumphant, as they stood alone. "Our day, our way." She smiled, but Heather's presence lingered like a bruise. "They'll never stop," she said, her voice low. Connor's jaw tightened, a flicker of fire in his eyes. "Let them try." His words sparked a quiet strength in her. As they left the clearing, hand in hand, Danielle held his vow, her spirit, unbroken. They'd mocked her love, her worth, but tonight under the stars she was a queen, her heart crowned by a man who saw her true empire. The community financial literacy hub glowed under golden lights, its modest brick facade transformed into a beacon of hope in Harlem's vibrant heart. Danielle Brooks stood backstage, her emerald gown shimmering like a jewel, her long black curls loose and proud, framing her face like a crown. The gala tonight celebrated the hub's expansion, a dream forged from her battles against Sterling and Pierce's venom. Peony centerpieces adorned white linen tables, their soft pinks echoing her wedding night, a quiet nod to the love that had carried her through. The room buzzed with community leaders, donors, and youth, their voices a vibrant hum of anticipation. Danielle's deep brown eyes scanned the crowd, her heart pounding, not with fear but with a fire that had outlasted every attempt to dim her. This was her moment, her legacy, and she would claim it. She clutched a note card, her speech a blade honed by months of pain. Heather Vaughn's lies, stolen notes, racial slurs that had tried to break her. But Danielle was unbreakable, forged. In Harlem's grit, tempered by Wall Street's cruelty, Connor Hayes appeared at her side, his tailored suit accentuating his broad shoulders, his green eyes glinting with pride. "Ready to change the world?" he asked, adjusting her necklace, his touch lingering like a vow. His hedge fund had donated millions to the hub, funding scholarships and workshops for generations. But his gaze said she was the true force. "Born ready," she replied, her smile cutting through nerves, her voice steady as jazz. The crowd hushed, the spotlight beckoning. Danielle stepped onto the stage, the golden light warm on her skin, her curls catching its glow. "Good evening," she began, her voice clear, resonating like a bell. "I'm Danielle Brooks, a black woman who was told I didn't belong." The room stilled, eyes locking onto hers. "At my firm, they mocked my roots, my skin, my dreams. They spread lies, stole my work, thought they'd silence me." Her words were a thunderclap, raw and unyielding. "But I'm here because of love, for my husband, my community, myself. This hub is my fight, teaching our youth to claim wealth, to stand tall, to shine." Applause swelled, a wave of affirmation that shook the walls. Her gaze found Connor in the front row, his pride a beacon, his nod urging her on. "They mocked my rooftop wedding," she continued, her voice rising. "But those vows are stronger than their hate. With Connor's support, we're launching a national financial equity initiative, because no one should fight alone." The crowd roared, some standing, their cheers a storm of solidarity. Among them, Heather Vaughn and Ryan, now volunteers after their demotion, clapped hesitantly, their faces drawn. Their public apology had been a bitter pill. Their presence tonight a tentative step toward redemption. Danielle met their eyes, her nod brief but firm. Forgiveness didn't mean trust, but their effort was a crack in their old armor. A young woman approached the stage, her braids gleaming, her eyes bright with tears. "Ms. Brooks," she said, her voice trembling, "I'm Tasha, one of your mentees. Because of you, I'm studying finance. You showed me I can dream big." She hugged Danielle, the embrace fierce, and the crowd erupted again, their cheers a thunderclap. Danielle's throat tightened. Tasha was her legacy, proof that her fight mattered. Connor joined her on stage, his hand finding hers, warm and steady. "Danielle's the visionary," he said, his voice carrying. "I'm just the guy lucky enough to stand by her." Laughter rippled, but his eyes held hers, a vow renewed under the gala's glow. The event surged on, music and chatter, filling the air, but Danielle felt a quiet certainty. She'd faced a firm that saw her as less, co-workers who'd weaponized her blackness, and a world that tried to box her in. Yet here she stood, her hub a lighthouse for those told they couldn't shine. Later, on the hub's balcony, she and Connor stood alone, Harlem's lights a canvas below. "You did it," he said, his arm around her, his voice soft with awe. "You turned their hate into this." She leaned into him, her curls brushing his shoulder. "We did it," she corrected, her heart full. "But Heather and Ryan, they're not done learning." He nodded, his jaw tight. "They'll have to. The firm is mandating anti-bias training and I'm funding it. No one pulls that on you." Again. His voice held a fierce edge, his love a shield. Danielle smiled, the city's pulse mirroring her own. The firm had promoted her to lead analyst, a hard-won victory. But the hub, Tasha's dreams, the national initiative, these were her true empire. Heather's lies had crumbled, but Danielle's fire burned brightest, a beacon for every kid who dared to rise. As they returned to the gala, Tasha's laughter rang out, a promise of tomorrow, and Danielle knew her legacy would soar, unyielding, forever unbroken. What a journey. Did Danielle's unyielding fire steal your heart, or was Connor's fierce loyalty the spark that lit this story? Maybe Tasha's dreams inspired you most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Where are you watching from and what time is it there? Your voice fuels these tales of triumph. A huge thank you for joining us on this ride. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to catch every new story of resilience and love. Share your predictions, your feelings. Let's keep the conversation live. See you next time for more unforgettable journeys.